Okay, I am going to talk about factors influencing medical devices and the disinfection and sterilization process. Now, this is from chapter 10 of the Instrument Resources Manual. So remember, these are laser focused lectures. If you wrote down everything I told you, you would be able to get a 100% on the homework assignment. Okay, it says in the introduction that today's instrument techs have multiple choices for disinfection and sterilization of medical devices. While the process of disinfection and sterilization are very different, both processes have one thing in common. The success or failure of each method depends on the preparation of the items to be disinfected or sterilized. There will be, of course, the need for making sure that everything is as clean as possible. Remember, we don't work in a sterile environment. All of the sterile that we're creating exists inside of a container or a peel pouch or a wrap set. But we do have to keep clean because the more contamination, bacteria, dust, things like that, that are packaged into a set or left on the instrument surfaces, the more difficult it becomes to sterilize. So in our department, instruments should flow from dirty to clean to prevent cross-contamination and any confusion between dirty and clean devices. So if something falls on the floor, it is dirty. Even though you cannot see blood or other things on it, it is still dirty. So one of the things that we have to do, well, some of the things that we have to do is proper attire and proper hygiene. Those go hand in hand. We're going to wash our hands frequently. We're going to keep our nail polish at home. We're going to make sure that our nails are short and clean. We're going to cover our hair. My long, beautiful locks are going to be covered. I would have to wear a beard cover because I have this growing on my face. Even if you have no hair, if you're completely bald, they want you to wear a hair covering because that scalp skin can still create dandruff, and we don't want that flaking off into the anything, anywhere, ever. We should avoid the use of oil-based hand lotions or makeups, which can be transferred to the surfaces of instruments. When you're working in sterile processing, you're really gonna realize how frequently you touch your face, because you're gonna be thinking, oh my gosh, I should go wash my hands. You're right. So you try to avoid touching your face if you're wearing oil-based makeups or hand lotions. This can transfer to the instruments and create a shelter for bacteria from the sterilization process. There's a picture on page 115. It shows some oil on an instrument. It looks like oil on the instrument caused the water to bead up. But at any rate, so oil on instrument, bad except for when prescribed by the manufacturer for lubricating purposes. Incomplete disassembly is one of the things that can cause sterilization failure or affect the sterilization process. So, you know, there are many instruments that need to be disassembled to be sterilized. Here's an example of one on page 115. If you do not disassemble this to clean it and then leave it apart for sterilization, it may not become sterile. Now, of course, you're going to want to consult the IFU for something like this, because all of these little pieces on this drill guide, if they should become lost in the somewhere, like if that little spring rolls down into somewhere down inside the tray, they might never find it. And yet it's still inside the tray because it's so small. So honestly, you guys, if I were taking over a hospital sterile processing department, I think I would say, hey, drill guides come out of the sets and we peel pack them separately, double pouched, of course, because they have multiple pieces. Okay, another thing that affects the process is incorrect use of cleaning chemicals, inadequate rinsing even of all cleaning chemicals will also cause the system to fail because the disinfectant or sterilant will not be able to make direct contact with the instruments. So if you're not rinsing in purified, what they call critical water, it could be reverse osmosis, it could be distilled water, or it could be deionized water. Whichever water you're using, it should be sufficient, copious amounts of rinsed water, and it should be purified. Inadequate cleaning, of course. You might not be able to see a tiny speck of blood inside of a lumen, but if it is there, you are going to have sterilization failure, at least on that spot, which of course means the entire item is not sterile. Lack of contact between the disinfectant or sterilant and the device. So we need to make sure that when we're assembling instrument sets, that we're not overloading trays. And that when we are loading sterilizers, that we're not overloading the sterilizers. So, of course, inadequate cleaning can cause lack of contact, but lack of contact with of sterilant with the device can also happen because we're overcrowding. We're overworking the process. Here is a picture of overcrowding of an instrument set on the bottom. I would definitely agree with that being an overcrowded set. There's a remedy for this. This looks like it is in one of the medium-sized baskets. If you put it in a larger basket, things would not be so densely compacted. If that's not the case, then maybe some of those instruments can come out and be put in a separate container. Now, this is not up to the individual instrument tech. This is up to the person who designs the instrument sets. There are certain circumstances where, let's say you have a major tray and it's got 109 instruments in it and it is overcrowded. They do things like, well, we'll just take all of the retractors out and we'll call it a major retractor set. Voila, now you have that. You've uncrowded the tray, and it may crowd your department more, but at least you can feel better about the amount of metal mass in those containers. Okay, high-level disinfectants. If you are using high-level disinfectants, and you probably will be, you should know that some disinfectants may not be compatible for use with specific types of patient conditions or diseases. Some bacteria and viruses are now showing resistance to some high-level disinfectants. These contraindications will be listed on the product label and in the instructions for use. Some disinfectants are actually designed for single use, whereas others can be used multiple times until that disinfectant becomes unusable because it no longer meets the minimum effective concentration or the minimum recommended concentration. These two terms are used interchangeably, although they do actually have different definitions. So know the definitions of these two terms. It says minimum effective concentration is the minimum concentration of a liquid chemical, sterilant, high-level disinfectant that achieves the claimed microbicidal activity. The MEC is determined by dose response testing. And then MRC is the minimum concentration at which the manufacturer of a liquid chemical sterilant or high-level disinfectant tested the product and validated its performance. Then read the note. It says the term minimum effective concentration and MRC are sometimes used interchangeably, but the MRC is not necessarily an MEC as determined by dose response testing. Some older IFUs may state MEC, not MRC. Okay. Now I'm going to skip to page 118. So there are some things that we can do in instrument tray setup other than overcrowding. We could make mistakes in this. See the two pictures at the top. These are silicone nubby mats, which I don't really like. I have my own personal issues with them. But sometimes they have to be in the trays. The trays belong to the vendor perhaps, and we cannot just take it upon ourselves to get rid of the nubby mats. So if the holes in the mat don't line up with the holes in the bottom of the tray, this can trap air and cause sterilization failure. So you see the one on the left, it says they're properly aligned. The one on the right, it says they're not properly aligned. That's pretty basic right there. Also, here's one of my main issues with the silicone mats. It seems like it just doesn't matter how long of a dry cycle you have on your washer, they come out wet. And they have to be dried properly before you can wrap that tray up and sterilize it. So if I had my druthers, I would be getting rid of the silicone mats and just using the paper disposable tray liners. There's a picture of foam apparently being used as a packaging material on the inside of a package. So never have I ever seen this happen. Let's just say that if they're using foam inside of a pack to protect these delicate endoscopes, that foam needs to be cleaned between uses. I don't even know. I just don't even know. All right, page 119, the picture of the water standing on the peel pouches. So this is why we make sure that our peel pouches are standing on edge. Okay, stand the peel pouches on edge. Do not lay them flat on their plastic side or the paper side, because you could end up with something like this. That package is not sterile, even though the water's on the outside, and you could probably wipe it away with a towel. Not sterile. Okay, another thing that can affect the sterility of packages even after they have been sterilized is placing items that have not cooled properly onto a cool or cold surface, like a stainless steel transport cart. This can cause the item to create condensate or condensation inside and then render the device unsterile. So it could be technically sterile water inside, but that doesn't matter. If there is water inside, or if water is allowed to be created inside by condensing steam, it is no longer a sterile item. And on the last page, page 120, some additional factors to consider. Wet or dry steam, as well as impurities in the steam, can cause sterilization failure. This is not something that you as a tech are in control of, but we need to, our department needs to make sure that the steam being delivered is actually the high quality steam that is 97 to 100% relative humidity. And then, believe it or not, incorrect drying time, using too long or too short of dry times can cause wet loads. Too long of a dry time can cause a wet load. If you're curious about any of these bits of information, you can purchase the AAMI Standard ST79 for $455. Or you can just take it on word of the book that these experts who wrote the book know what they're talking about. Okay. I'm going to end this recording.